are here at the 4th Annual Level Ground Festival in Pasadena. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to learn a little bit more about what Wildfire is, how it got started, why it got started, and then we'd love to hear just some reflections on the conversation that we had today. So I know you two started it together. Do you want to maybe introduce yourselves and kind of where this came from?
Sure.
I'm Mark Kramer.
And I'm Cameron Cash. I feel like we were just sort of hanging out and talking about like different ways that, you know, we wanted to activate and
after the election.
Right, exactly. Sorry, after the election, we were both just feeling very we wanted to do something that was meaningful. I mean, we were obviously participating in protests and doing, you know, posting all the things on social media and doing that, but we were trying to figure out something that we could do that would be very real and I think very local, something that would start, you know, very small that could then expand outward, something that we were just talking about, you know, the importance of, you know, the idea that this election seemed very, very polarized, more so than any that I had ever witnessed as an adult. That the Democrats had their dogma and the Republicans had their dogma, and only they were right. Like the Republicans were right and there was nothing right about the Democrats, and then vice versa. And that just, it seemed like a really broken way for a country based on diversity and sort of the idea of celebrating differences. It just seemed like a broken way for the government, or really our country, to be continuing forward.
Right, I mean, I think more so than ever, and I think a lot of our experiences, my personal experience has been how polarized every issue is. It's, like you said, it's this othering, like, you believe this, and I believe that, and that's it. And so the goal really for Wildfire is to get everybody in a room and to take the debate and the rhetoric and the talking points. Like, we watched all the debates, we know what everyone believes and why they believe it from like a statistical standpoint, but kind of stripping all of that away and really looking at, you know, the humanity behind the things that we believe. So, you know, inviting these conversations, we, you know, each panel, we called our panel of Main Street Americans, and it's, you know, before every discussion, you know, we tell all the panelists that nobody in this room has to be an expert on anything except their experience. And so we're talking about, you know, I grew up in this kind of home and I had this experience, and in my day-to-day life this happens to me, and that has led me to this belief. And just inviting into the room, okay, now that that's heard, that's received, and I can ask those questions freely, and not to debate or to justify, but to be heard.
So we just decided that we wanted to make this event happen. We just want to do it once a month. We're just going to bring these opposite point of views into one room and then try to understand each other.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And so this is the third one that you've hosted? Is
Correct.
that true?
Yeah,
Okay.
the first one we did was called Finding Common Ground in the First 100 Days. And it's right when Trump was elected, and we looked at immigration, healthcare reform, and immigration policy, economic policy, and how that would be shaped by the Trump administration. And then the second event was
called #ThereIsNoTruth.
I love it.
We're really proud of that one.
And it was about journalism, social media, transparent government, and the intersection of those three.
Okay.
And we brought in, they were everyday Americans, but they were people from those sectors, had sort of personal stories to tell about how, you know, how journalism, how journalistic integrity, how that really works, how social media has affected the way we view our politicians. And then we did
today's discussion.
Yes, liberty and justice for, but then we didn't add the last word, because that's what we're sort of trying to figure out as a country, as a nation, as a Supreme Court, and as a family, who's protected by our Constitution. So I moderated that discussion. Thanks, yes. With 4 really interesting and pretty uniquely different panelists. You know, yeah. And at the same time, you also have to acknowledge the African American transgender female on the panel doesn't represent every African American transgender female in the country. We're like, instead of looking at this from a macro perspective, we're going super micro, and I just want to hear your human specific story, and something about really seeing someone's fingerprint as opposed to like an archetype or a caricature of a community, but like really understanding this one girl makes the story and the lessons that much more palpable. And I think what was most rewarding was seeing the compassion that everyone walked away with.
Yeah, it's almost like when you, certainly what gets said and what happens in the room can be transformative, but it's almost just going through the experience. It doesn't matter what gets said, you're just in a room with people who are different from you, and you're trying to listen, and you're reflecting on your own experience, and you're hearing other people's experiences, and that is something we don't do very often. And school should certainly be a place that happens. Faith communities, churches could be places where that happens, but it seems like more and more we're losing that space. And so I think both for Level Ground and for Wildfire, of trying to say there's value in being in a room together, having uncomfortable conversations, and being willing to listen, if not change, to listen and start there.
And also questioning why we're losing that space. Why are we pulling ourselves into these echo chambers? Because it doesn't, maybe it serves us on some sort of, emotional level, but in sort of the grand scheme of like moving forward, ideologically, I mean, it's I don't know how to describe it, but it's terrible.
Well, to take a note from one of our panelists, Shandy Moore today, one of the things that I'm going to walk away with is we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And we often retreat into those echo chambers, into our group of yes, because that's where it's comfortable for us to sit. We don't have to challenge anything that we believe. And so having those uncomfortable conversations. And then also another one of the panelists came up to me afterwards, Jay, and she was like, I really appreciate just being allowed to ask a question without fear of retribution of the question that I'm asking. And it's true. I mean, we, in our day-to-day lives, I certainly experience, can I ask this? And if I do, like, what is that person gonna, how are they gonna react to that? It's an honest question. And another one of our panelists, was talking about his experience as a bouncer, and, asking someone to use a certain bathroom, and, he recanted this. I wasn't trying to be hurtful or hateful. I just didn't understand. And then once it was explained, he said, oh, I'm right. So I think it's also just about as much as how we react to people coming at us as, it is like respecting how we approach people. Well,
and I like to think that this is sort of a discipline, a posture, and a discipline that we need to practice and cultivate more. And so at Level Ground, we've been doing this for a number of years. It's our 4th festival, our 5th year as an organization. We have certainly learned many lessons along the way of like, how do you model an elevated public discourse? So I'm wondering, what have you learned in the last few wildfires that you've hosted, of just how to do it better, because it's not something that happens, it's not something we've really seen, and so how are you adjusting to what happens each time?
Well, each event we try intentionally to like make little tweaks to the format so that we can figure out what works most effectively. I think that we have five agreements that we make, and that's, you will listen to whomever's speaking, you will not speak over that person, help me out here, you will ask questions, you will continue the conversation, and you will not debate. And I think the thing that helps us the most is being really cognitive of not debating. And
that's where you want to go.
That's where you want to go. Naturally, we want to be heard and we want to be right because that feels good. But in all of these conversations, the thing that is continually reinforced for me is not debating and making sure everyone, like Jay said to me, that she felt safe asking the question so that she could get an honest answer, and so that we can digest what is being said, and then we can take that out into the world.
Yeah, I think that the idea of sort of trying to restrict the idea of debate, you get into this kind of ideological sort of gray area, because you share your perspective and I have a completely different perspective. That's not necessarily debate, but my truth may be sort of contradictive to your truth. So it's we have sort of always had 4 panelists and a moderator. But that seems to be the best way to make an audience comfortable with because then they can always be the audience. They don't necessarily have to participate, but we invite them to participate because really it's about everyone in the room. Everybody has a story to tell, and we want to hear all of those stories.
And the more vulnerable you are, the more vulnerable the next person's going to be in their share.
Yeah, the panelists, again, not experts on anything except their own experiences. Their stories are more important to be, it's not more important to hear their stories than it is to hear anybody else's story in the room. So really, they're just a foil to invite everybody into that space.
Exactly.
Yeah, someone once talked about giving somebody the gift of going second, and so I think that's what the panel does, is they go first and then invite other people to share vulnerably, so I think that is really beautiful when that happens. Miriam, what did it feel like to moderate? How are you trying to like draw out? And
It's really interesting. It's I have moderated quite a few panels. This one touches upon subject matter that is very dear and important to me. So on one hand, sort of like removing my own passion and my own biases from it, because I'm just a conduit to the conversation. I'm not trying to already slant the narrative. But also, it's LA, and sometimes the differences between the different panelists and the audience members in terms of their life experience or their opinion about, say, gun control or, you know, gay rights or the transgender bathroom bill, it's not black and white, and as we were discussing earlier, it's really nuanced. So finding where's the difference between how you and you feel, like this is the part that we really want to get to. This is the part where we really want us to trade experiences and to trade point of views for this one moment in this room. And so getting to that part is hard, because the way we hear the narrative on all of these hot button issues in the news, it is very black and white. It's extremely polarized, but I think in most rooms it's not that polarized. So being able to like really ascertain how are these two shades of gray different, that's I think an inherent challenge.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if you were to force people to choose and put themselves in a box, you might have everybody choose the same box, but there are so many differences, and when we ignore those differences, we just become more polarized, and then we erase people's experiences. So I think starting with everyday Americans, their experiences, their stories, and letting us kind of think about policy up from there is so much more helpful than trying to just like build some sort of policy that's going to work for everyone.
Right.
Exactly.
So we're on Twitter at Me the Wildfire. That's our main social channel. We purposely choose to activate the most on there because that is where our current president activates the most. So
I noticed.
yes, twice as much as our last president, if anyone's paying attention. But yeah, I mean, our topics are we're always reaching for topics that can elicit these personal responses. So we've talked about doing ones about voting. You know, today we did have a third topic that we didn't have time to to get to, which was all about women's reproductive justice. So there are definitely we definitely have sort of ideas in the swirling around. But what we try to do also is we don't necessarily want to be talking about something that is super relevant to something that's happening immediately, because we want to make sure that we continue conversations that maybe move in and out of popularity. We tend to be conversations, particularly political conversations, are oftentimes very dictated by media. And so we want to make sure that we continue to talk about these things that maybe the media has left behind.
I think that's really great. Well, thank you for coming and sharing.
Thank you for having us.
With us. It really was a joy to have you at the festival, and we're excited to keep supporting you and see
Likewise.
what's next.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.